The following program includes graphic images and mature subject matter intended for adult audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Among the horrors committed by ISIS is what the United Nations calls a campaign to wipe out Yazidis, a religious minority in Iraq. ISIS has taken thousands of women hostage, using them as sex slaves. As unlikely as it sounds, a Jewish car dealer from Montreal is trying to set them free. His name is Steve Mammon, and so far he's saved more than 100 women and girls. It's earned him the nickname the Jewish Schindler. But as Alison Vushnik reports, not everyone is calling him a hero.
Market day. ISIS militants buying and selling women and girls as sex slaves. Yazidi women sold, beaten, and raped. This is an Islamic State group or ISIS propaganda video that surfaced in October 2014. In this barbaric market, the women are for sale, priced based on appearance and age. The younger, the more expensive.
يزيدية سبية تقدر عليها.
In August 2014, ISIS militants stormed villages in the Sinjar region in northern Iraq, targeting the Yazidis, a religious minority. They massacred thousands and kidnapped over 3,000 women and girls to rape and sell. But soon, their story was just another of so many about the brutality of ISIS flooding the news. Day after day, and after a year, the missing women became little more than a footnote in a bigger war. Today, the world seems to have mostly forgotten. But not this man.
In the month of August 2014, obviously we know that Sinjar was actually encircled by ISIS. The news of the terrible things that were occurring to them, the horrors of what ISIS brought upon the Yazidi people and the Christians in that area in Mosul, came out about a month and a half later when they started selling them as slaves, etc.
Steve Mammon could not turn away from what he saw.
600 young men that were actually scattered on the ground, and they're just walking by and just shooting with a machine gun. Those are videos that ISIS actually proudly presented on YouTube to people and in the news. ISIS made sure that you knew exactly what was happening. They wanted you to know. They weren't trying to hide it. They were actually trying to show it. I decided not to remain a spectator, and I decided to act.
Steve, a vintage car dealer in Montreal, has everything he could want: a beautiful family, wealth, community. But he refuses to let this dark chapter in history pass without doing something.
We have it too easy. We're stuck in our daily routines that are so busy. I have 6 children, school, work. There's no time for me. I look at the news, I see what's happening to these people on the news. They kill them. Okay, they kill them. What can you do? But if you stop for a moment and imagine that ISIS was in Montreal and we were hostage, you would be praying the most beautiful prayers that a human being could send to God, that somebody come and rescue you.
Women and children being held captive in hellish conditions by ISIS touches on something deeply personal within Steve, a history of his own people.
During the Holocaust, people that were in Auschwitz knew that these gas chambers and these ovens were actually a killing machine. And one would probably be praying not to find himself there. And every day that goes by, you think today's the day that someone's going to come and rescue you. Hopefully, God, today's the day. And 6 years went by. 6 years. You know how long that is? 6 years, day by day, where you pray and you wait, nothing shows up. And these girls have been there for a year. A day is too much. It's been a year.
Inspired by the humanity of Oskar Schindler, the German businessman who rescued 1,200 Jews from the gas chambers during the Holocaust, Steve has been nicknamed the Jewish Schindler for a mission he calls not a choice, but rather divine providence.
I realized after a year, nobody has done anything. Yes, they're planning, but in the meantime, they're in Auschwitz, they're in Mosul. If I could do something, I'm going to do it. And this is why I acted.
The question was how Steve was going to carry out a seemingly impossible feat, rescuing kidnapped Yazidi women lost inside the Islamic State from his home in Montreal.
I acted with what I had in my hands, and what I had in my hands was great.
A few years ago for his business, Steve was tracking down a vintage car in Iraq, and through his work there, he met some very influential people.
One of them was the vicar of Baghdad, Canon Andrew White. He's a Christian priest in the middle of Baghdad, catering to 10,000 Christians that are being persecuted. He tries to protect them, he tries to, supply for them.
Andrew White is a British-born Anglican canon who's nicknamed the Vicar of Baghdad for doing God's work as a peacemaker, mediator, and negotiator in the bloodiest war zones. He's backed by a highly trained elite security team.
His support for me was very important because he had an important team on the ground.
In November 2014, Steve set up his organization CYCI, the Liberation of Christian and Yazidi Children of Iraq. At the same time, the church called Canon White back from Baghdad. It had become far too dangerous. When Canon White left, his security team stayed behind.
That gave me the opening in order to be able to maybe convince him to use the best elements of his team. We know that Canon White's team was the best 35 soldiers to protect of security of Iraq. We know that a lot of them were specializing in hostage negotiations. They had credentials that were incredible. Why go out and find a new team? I convinced him to assist me in putting together the best elements from his team, and he did. And with that, we had an incredible team on the ground in a flash.
Steve got to work raising money in Canada to fund his team, a team willing to risk their lives to bring back the women and girls held captive in ISIS-controlled territory.
We put together this whole plan. In the month of June, we were already working on the ground.
Next, following the commandments.
How many more girls and women do you hope to rescue?
My goal is 613, because there's 613 Jewish commandments in the Torah.
The following program includes graphic images and mature subject matter intended for adult audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Two Yazidi women, 18 and 22, sold into sexual slavery by ISIS. Today, a Canadian organization is rescuing them and taking them to Dahuk, where many Yazidis fled after ISIS destroyed their villages and murdered thousands. These two women have been held captive for 11 months and have no idea if any of their family escaped the massacre. The team is taking them to the outskirts of Dahuk in Iraq to meet a man they think may be one of the girls' fathers. Once they arrive, it becomes clear that father and daughter have been reunited.
I never thought it would have gone so well.
This is one of the first liberations carried out by Steve Maman's CYCI team on the ground in Iraq and filmed by his volunteers.
Each story is incredible, every one of them. They each have a life, they each have a world. The world could start again from them. At every liberation, I always say to everybody, all the volunteers, if CYCI had to stop today, I would be the happiest person on earth. Because what we did today is incredible.
Steve made it his mission to find a way to rescue Yazidi women and children kidnapped and enslaved by ISIS. From his home in Montreal, Steve raises money to send to his team on the ground in Iraq.
The majority of our funds are expenses. Security, protection, armored cars rentals, personnel, armed personnel. We're going next to the border, to Mosul. You don't go there on a bicycle.
Steve is getting more than just money from Canada. He's also getting volunteers like emergency medic Andrew Rack. At home in Alberta, he's practicing his skills for remote rescues. You saw a Canadian was raising money.
Yes.
To save these women and girls.
Yes.
You go basically once a year.
Yes.
Overseas to help where you feel you're needed.
Yes.
Why do you do that? And what motivated you to even start doing that?
My brother was killed in Angola. And that's where it started. He had no care for 24 hours. And when I wanted to go overseas, I didn't want that to happen to somebody else.
Andrew wanted to give his money and his time to Steve's cause. But at first, he was skeptical.
Steve is a businessman from Montreal. Why would he be involved in the Middle East, in that area of the Middle East?
Andrew wasn't alone in his doubts. As Steve began to carry out his mission in Iraq and ISIS territory, people questioned whether he was actually rescuing women or if he was just a salesman with an elaborate charity scam. Headlines questioned whether Steve was paying ISIS, a serious allegation that in Canada could be akin to funding terrorism. Allegations Steve vehemently denies.
Our brokers do not pay anything to get the girls back.
The money is exchanging hands, so who?
It's exchanged between the CYCI team inside Iraq and the corresponding teams inside the Caliphate for their own expenses. They do not pay to get the girls back from the civilians or people that are holding these girls.
So how do they get them back from the civilians or from ISIS who are holding these girls without paying them?
Through negotiation, very simply.
So no money exchanges hands?
Not at all. Not directly and not indirectly. There is no payment going to ISIS. Nobody can walk up to ISIS and buy a girl. You die on the spot.
Andrew Rack volunteered in Iraq for the first time in September. He witnessed Steve's team in action.
Like when there's a rescue mission, it's kind of surreal because the team leader is talking with Steve live, like in real time.
Steve, this is the family welcoming the daughter back.
Andrew's job was to step in and provide medical care when women and girls were rescued. He witnessed a mother reunited with her 3 children and baby, freed from slavery.
The negotiations are done. The women show up. The family acknowledges they've been gone for a year. So it's true. It's obvious. So if it's not real, why would a man go through all this? Why would a man stay up in the middle of the night for a charade?
Obvious to those on the ground, perhaps, but doubt still exists. To combat it, Steve has been documenting the rescues since the beginning. He's eager to show us the paperwork he keeps to prove the rescues are legit.
We filmed that moment, and we actually make them sign and we take their fingerprints. All this is videotaped and and photographed. And we have the originals of these documents, and we keep them, and we have records.
Steve keeps track of all the documentation from every release, keeping the courier waybills to prove the documents have come from Iraq. And in those records, the words of the women and girls themselves, their own handwritten accounts of months of rape and abuse.
They married me by force and raped me. After that, I feared there is no life, and I tried to kill myself, but it not complete. I wasn't able to complete the killing of myself. Every day I was crying because I don't have another way.
File after file, folder after folder, Steve has documented the rescue of 140 women and children from slavery in the Islamic State.
Yeah, you relive the emotions. It's anger. Right now I'm getting angry. I'm feeling warm already, and it's anger. That's all it is. It builds anger, you get angry.
By documenting every liberation, Steve's intent is not just proving himself to his detractors, he's creating a war record.
We're doing it in order to keep this information for later on in life when Iraq is going to become a secure country again. Those people that actually committed these crimes could face the court of law. We have their names, we know who they are, we have the location of where they lived in some cases, and those documents will be important one day because there will be testimonies of what they did.
The United Nations is investigating the ISIS massacre of the Yazidi people, evaluating if it classifies as a genocide. No matter what it's called, Steve Maman is determined to do all he can to bring the women and girls back to their families.
And all we have today are going to be memories and documents and proof of what we've done for other human beings when we had the chance to do it. I hope there won't be another chance like that in life where we'll be able to do this again. It shouldn't be. This should be the last time this happens, I hope. My goal is 613. 613, why? Because there's 613 Jewish commandments in the Torah. They say one who does the 613 commandments attains perfection. Therefore, my goal is 613 human beings saved. We're very far from it.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Coming up next week on 16 by 9, she was taken hostage in a war zone for 28 days. Now, correspondent Melissa Fung returns to Afghanistan for a close-up look at the plight of women caught in a cycle of violence.
After having interviewed a few people at the camp, I was kidnapped by 3 armed gunmen. I've always wanted to go back and make sure that the story gets told.
When the situation is not secure, the first victims will be women and children.
Taliban come and they have a list and they are asking for you, so you should escape from them.
We hope you'll join us for that story next week on 16 by 9. In the meantime, that is our broadcast for tonight. A reminder, you can always connect with us on Facebook and Twitter or at globalnews.ca/16 by 9. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. From all of us here at 16 by 9, thanks for watching.